I will be leading our practice today. There are no other announcements. And so we can have a nice long stretch of practice together this week. For those of you who have been with us this week, know that our Torah portion this coming Shabbat is Shemot, the first Torah portion in the book of Exodus. Action-packed, of course, but it also includes, as has been mentioned this week by some of the other teachers, some passages, phrases, and just a scene, which is really a paradigm for Jewish mindfulness meditation practice. Sometimes people will say, well, what's so Jewish about meditation or mindfulness meditation? And once we are familiar with what is involved in mindfulness meditation, when we bring that and look at the Torah through that lens, we find so many opportunities and so many moments and situations which seem to describe the identical process. And one of the paradigmatic examples of that is in this week's Torah portion, where Moses, who is, after all, a fugitive from the law, he's on the lam, he's on the run, wanted for murder in Egypt, runs away to Midian in the Sinai, gets married, has children, gets a nice cushy job, taking care of his father-in-law's flocks, but he's got a lot on his mind. He's got a lot going on internally. And what does he do? He seems to go on retreat. Takes time to go on retreat. He takes his father-in-law Jethro's flocks and goes, the Torah says, achar hamidbar, to the edge of the wilderness, really like out to the boonies, out where he will not be distracted by anything, where there will be stillness, where there'll be quiet. And in that space, he's able to be a little bit more attentive to what actually is going on around him and within him. He's rid himself of those distractions, and so the truth that lies under the surface begins to emerge, begins to bubble up within him, actually whether he likes it or not. And so, of course, the famous scene is at the bush where Moses is taking care of the flock. He goes to the edge of the wilderness, as I mentioned, and something catches his attention, catches his eye, the bush that's aflame and seems not to burn up. And he turns aside to look. There is, there's an interpretation that says, actually, bushes on fire in the Sinai wilderness were not so unusual. Maybe lightning strikes hitting dead trees. Those of you who have been in drought-stricken areas where you see trees or bushes that are scarred by lightning, blackened by lightning, or have caught fire, maybe can recognize this. May not be so attention-grabbing because it may feel pretty common, but one of these interpretations is that people walked by these burning bushes all the time without noticing it. But what made Moses unique was that he actually took the time to pay attention to the bush that was on fire, and he watched it long enough to notice that the bush was not being consumed, which required staying with it, not just looking at it and saying, oh, a bush on fire. He said, I'm going to really examine this. I'm going to look deeply. I'm going to look closely. I'm going to look with curiosity at what is happening. And everything flows from that. There's no revelation until he enters into that state of being. And then, of course, he gets an epiphany, which calls him to return to Egypt to free his people. Not a small thing. And he's resistant to it. He's struggles with it. He objects to the call. He doesn't want to hear that message. And there's a negotiation with God. And of course, we know the rest of the story. But the point is that something comes up that is undeniable and not necessarily so welcome to him. This is Jewish mindfulness practice, really, right there in the Torah, of turning aside, of looking closely, of letting go of conviction and substituting curiosity about what is really true in this moment right now. And what is one of the passages, one of the phrases that's striking about this reading is that when the revelation comes, what Moses hears at first is the instruction for him to remove his shoes, because the place he's standing on is Admat Kodesh, holy ground, standing on holy ground. So I want to invite us today for our practice to access our inner Moses, or take a walk in Moses' shoes and take them off, as we were invited to earlier this week by Robin Damsky. If you're comfortable, if you have shoes on, you might want to take them off. They don't have to, not necessary, but you might want to, because we want to become aware of the Adamah, the ground on which we are sitting or standing or walking or laying down right now in a prone position. Whatever position you're in, we're being supported by the Adamah. And what we're striving to do is to notice, oh, this is a sacred place. Wherever you're sitting right now, it's a sacred place. And whatever moment we go through over the course of the day is a sacred moment. Every interaction we have, every experience we have is brimming with holiness if we pay attention, if we notice it, if we don't treat it as mundane or profane, or if we don't profane it. So our simple task as Jews, as we've been invited to, is to live lives of Kedusha, of sanctity, of holiness. How do we sanctify each moment? By noticing the sanctity that's already present. That's really to put it in simple terms. Simple terms, really challenging practice. So I want to invite us to sit, and I'm going to invite us to sit just by beginning by taking a few, not by taking, but by receiving a few deep breaths. Big difference between taking a breath and receiving a breath. So I want to invite you right now to accept the gift of 3 deep breaths deep into your belly. If your eyes are open and you'd like to let them close, that's fine. Alternatively, you can just let them go into a soft focus so that nothing is sharp in your field of vision. It's just all dissolving. Or alternatively, just bring awareness into the body as the breath enters and leaves the body, enters and leaves the lungs and expands the belly. And as our internal systems that transform the oxygen, as it enters the bloodstream, gets carried to all parts of the body. So though we're receiving breaths into our lungs and our bellies, actually, we're receiving that oxygen and that breath in all parts of the body. All those vessels carrying are the breath and enlivening us right now. Just appreciate that right now, just to be alive. Another Heschel teaching. Just to be is holy. Just to be is holy. So I invite you to stay with that awareness of the Kedusha, the holiness that is permeating all of your body right now. The holiness that is permeating the Adamah, the ground, the very ground which is holding you up right now. We are at that bush, just like Moses, right now, and can be at any moment if we choose to. And I will play for us at the end a song based on words by Woody Guthrie, Holy Ground, performed by the Klezmatics, that will take us out. But for now, let's just sit together on this holy ground that we all share, the holy ground that is our body, that is our aliveness right now. If your mind has drifted away, that's to be expected. Just notice that with a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness, and bring it back to your intention to stay present to this moment, to the holiness that is here in the body, in the earth, in the moment. Just to be is holy. As we breathe and just sit together, as we're just being together, relaxing the places of tension in the body, maybe in the face and the jaw, softening, loosening, bringing some ease to the body, feeling the stillness. And let the words of the song be our guide and instructor for the end of our sit, for the last 5 minutes of our sit, as a reminder of the Admat Kodesh, the holy ground of this place and this moment.
Take off your shoes. This place you're standing is holy ground. Take off spot I walk is holy ground. Every spot on earth I tread surround. Every spot I walk is holy ground. Every spot is holy ground. Every little inch is holy ground. Every grain of dirt is holy ground. Every spot I walk is holy ground. Every spot is holy ground. Every little inch is holy ground. Every grain of dirt is holy ground. Every spot I walk, it's holy ground.
Coming to the end of our sit together, just letting those words be absorbed into our brains and our bodies and our hearts. Coming back to where we began by just receiving breaths as gifts that we are given moment by moment. Not to be taken, but to be gratefully received. And if your eyes have been closed and you're ready, you can begin to allow the eyelids to open very gently and maybe wiggle your toes and your fingers. Maybe put your hand over your heart space and give yourself some appreciation for showing up for our practice today. This precious opportunity we have to just to sit together, to be together. To remember that just as Rabbi Heschel reminds us, just to be is holy. And we can come back to the group, and maybe if you're in gallery view, you can take a look around and or look at the list of participants and offer some gratitude to each other for sharing our little retreat in the mead bar today and meeting up at the bush which is our meetup spot every day. And we seal our practice, our chatima, which is the blessing formula that ends most Jewish prayers, the Baruch Atah. Our chatima, our sealing, is the opportunity to mark the end of our sit with the mourner's Kaddish. So if you're in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the Kaddish to do so, put the name or names of anyone that you're honoring today in the chat box. If you're not reciting Kaddish, to just stay present with loving support for those who are, creating a minyan of comfort and support. And thanks to Kat for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. If you're reciting Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute as we recite the words together. Thanks again, Kat, for doing so. Yitgadal Kadash Shemei Rabbi. Shmei Rabba Bevarach La'olam U'amei Maya Yitrach Elam Birchata V'Nechamata Iran Ba'olam Hey Shlama Rabba Minjuda Imainu El Shalom Amen. Amen. Thanks to everyone, of course. Dave, thanking you so much for setting aside the time in your day for practice together, and gratitude to Kat, as always, for holding our space for us, but most of all to each of you for your wonderful devotion. If any of you maybe you're joining us for the first time today, we're so glad to have you here, and we hope you'll come back. Of course, we'll be here to sit into Shabbat together for our Friday sit at the usual time. And if you're leaving us now, we hope you'll join us then. And if we don't see you before then, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom and a meaningful Shabbat Shemot as we gather at the burning bush together this Shabbat. I'm happy to stay on to respond to questions in the chat if people have any. Of course, you can also you're welcome just to use this time until we end, just to stay with your practice and continue sitting. I'd like to think about this time after we close our sit with the Kaddish as ongoing practice, really, hopefully to bring some of the experience of our sit into the conversation. So I will keep an eye on the chat, and if you have a question, if you could preface it by writing question in caps, I'll keep an eye, catch those, or elaborate on anything that might have been unclear. Yeah, I will put a link to the song. This is, as I mentioned, here we go. As I mentioned, the song is called Holy Ground. It's from a wonderful, really an incredible album by the Klezmatics called Wonder Wheel, which I just highly recommend. They're all songs, as I understand it, they're all songs that are based on lyrics by Woody Guthrie, songs I think that he might have been working on, or lyrics that were found and recovered and that they set to music. And earlier this week, Robin Damsky shared another version of Holy Ground by Craig Taubman, the Jewish singer-songwriter. And my daughter, who is a Swiftie, reminds me that Taylor Swift also has a song called Holy Ground, which might fit the bill as well. But I especially like this one. And this is that link is to a live version that they did at Town Hall in New York. So it's particularly beautiful, I think. Oh, the Heschel text. Well, so the Heschel text, let me see if I can find that, but hold on. So Heschel, of course, is famous for his book, The Sabbath. Oh yeah, I actually misquoted him. Okay. I have to look for where the source of this is, what book it's in, or where he gave this talk. But what Heschel actually said is, just to be is a blessing, just to live is holy. So as opposed to doing something. So I think it's interesting because in Jewish tradition and Jewish practice, we often think or we're taught that doing a mitzvah is a way of manifesting holiness, and that's true. But there's also a little bit of a paradox. Um, there's a little bit of a paradox that we get in the mitzvah of Shabbat, which is basically a mitzvah to be and not to do. So it doesn't, it involves the action of not doing. So it really describes what we're doing here every day of, we're taking steps, we're taking an action to boundary some time to do nothing or what appears to be nothing. We're not writing, we're not creating something new. We are just bearing witness as honestly and with as much curiosity and with as much integrity as we can about what is true. And I find that story of Moses at the bush really so powerful because it's a kind of it's an epiphany, it's a revelation, it's kind of an enunciation in a way. But one would expect that the recipient of the revelation to say, okay, message received, I accept my mission. And of course, Moses, like most of the prophets in Jewish tradition, is reluctant. He's a reluctant prophet. It's part of the characteristics. This is not something that he is welcoming or looking forward to or is pleasant for him. It's not something that he really is, as I said, he's not really welcoming it. And so he objects and says, who am I? I can't speak. And really, why can't you send somebody else? And he has all these objections. And in that kind of dialogue, which we might just understand as like an inner conversation that's going on, a struggle that's going on within Moses, each objection is met with an answer. Like, okay, not like just be quiet and do what I told you, but like, yeah, I hear the objection. Let's think about the solution. Let's not live in the problem. Let's live in the solution. There's a solution to that, and there's a solution to that. I hear your objection. Objection sustained. Here's an alternative. And so it's a gradual process by which Moses has this awareness of, oh boy, I have to go back. He thought he was in a safe place, freed from the burden, whatever burden he might have experienced in terms of his responsibility to people. But gradually he's able to absorb that and to realize that he doesn't have to do it alone, which is a lesson that he continues to learn as we move through the Torah. His brother Aaron comes to meet him and acts as the spokesperson, and gradually he turns over the reins to Joshua, and in many ways to the whole people by the end of the Torah. Spoiler alert. All right. Nora Guthrie led a concert with Woody's Jewish music a few years ago in New York and includes some home movies. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's very moving, very, very moving. Just looking for any questions here. Oh, okay, good one. Linda is asking, I've heard and read that holy and sacred are usually defined as separate. The Hebrew word is, the root is kuf dalet shin, a root which has a connotation of separation. How is that reconciled with other teachings like today's about every moment, step, or space being holy? Great question. Great question. It's a great question. Just going to sit with that for a minute. The answer that's coming up for me, the response that's coming up for me, it's not the answer. It's an answer to that. I think is that Holiness or the sacred is a state of awareness or consciousness that involves stepping out of that stepping off the treadmill, separating ourselves from that, setting aside, at least in terms of our practice, it makes sense that this is safe. This is a sacred time for many of you, because I see, I don't know, maybe 80% of the folks who are here every day are here, I would say, on a pretty regular basis. I see your names almost every day. I see your faces on the screen almost every day. This has become a sacred time that you have set aside. So set aside in order to witness the sacred, because if we didn't set aside the time or set aside the moment, we would miss it. We might miss the moment, just like Moses might have missed the bush burning. So that's a response. But I hear the question, and it's just like, that's a good question. It's going to stay with me, and I will think about it some more. Is meditation like a mini Shabbat? That's really what I'm suggesting, is that meditation is a mini Shabbat, but that we can also, the thing about Shabbat is that although it is a day of the week, it is meant to be infused into the rest of the week. The Havdalah ceremony at the end of the Shabbat, which includes the use of some aromatic spices, right, as one of the elements of Havdalah. There are lots of explanations for the spices and why we smell them. But my favorite of those is that it's at the boundary between Shabbat and non-Shabbat. We have this infusion of scent that infuses the sweetness of Shabbat, the awareness of Shabbat into the rest of the week. It's a setting of intention to bring Shabbat awareness into the moments when we're not, quote, in Shabbat. So these little meditations that we do every day, or the micro meditations that you might do over the course of your day, just taking a moment to pause before saying a word, before responding, before brushing your teeth, just taking a breath, that too is a little moment of pausing, of not doing, in order to have that space, which gives us the opportunity to either act or not act, or speak or not speak, in a way that's informed by awareness of wanting to make that speech, wanting to make that action, something that adds to holiness in our daily lives. Sounds good. I mean, sign me up for that. And it is, as we all know, so challenging. But without Shabbat, you might say we don't have a prayer. Such very, thank you. Thank you for these really nice comments, and thank you for the appreciation for the group. Okay, I think we're going to leave it at that. For those who didn't have it, I'm going to put the link. Let me put the link to the song once again in the chat. Maybe that will be a soundtrack. Also, the Heschel quote is there. You can put that on a Post-it note in your medicine cabinet or over your kitchen sink, and maybe listen to the song a little bit as a reminder that every grain, I love that, every grain of sand is holy ground. So thanks everyone. As always, great to be with you. I'm grateful for this opportunity to practice together, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks to Kat, as always, and many blessings to you.